Hello everyone. This is going to be my first video about research. I've been researching for years now. I love research, and especially I research about languages because I grew up into languages. So this is going to be actually an introductory video, and I don't know where the talk will lead. My mother tongue is Turkish, but I grew up bilingual. I once knew German better than Turkish. Only when I came to Turkey, I developed my Turkish as well, and now I can speak Turkish very well, I can say, like my mother tongue now. So Turkish has become my mother tongue. So it was once German, and now it's Turkish. So I can say I can speak both the languages well, and I was born into languages actually, and it was multi-languages. So when I analyze from a different point. I have a different viewpoint, which I try to free from politics and nationalism, etc. It only saddens me when I see comments, or when I, for example, comment on something that it is misunderstood and turned into a completely different direction, even when scholars claim something where they are right, and still people come up and full of hatred. Anyway, let me stick to the topic. As I said, I grew up with languages, and when I analyze in a kind of different way. So this topic actually has to do with the Indo-European languages and the Turkic languages. That means the Ural Altaic languages. Actually, there are some scholars who claim that the Altaic family does not exist, or the family tree does not exist. But I don't know, for some reason, I think the Uralic languages and Altaic languages are still related. I think Asia once served the whole continents. I even claim that Asia is the oldest in civilizations. Some people or some scholars might be not agree with me in that sense. I also think that the languages which served civilizations, for example, say now, let's say, for example, the Chinese language, or which is very old, of course, or the Indian language, or let's say, for example, Sumerian, etc. They had, let me put it that way, I will put it general. They had the Ural languages, or the Ural Altaic languages, both as a root, or the prototypes of these languages, of course. Turkish didn't exist those times, but some kind of Uralic language close to Turkic languages, or close to Hungarian, with a mixture of some Old Russian or Old Greek languages, or even old Indo-European lexicons existed, vocabulary. I think there was a source, and that source spread in Asia. But it is not, as some most claim, it was not the majority of the people who spoke that language. It might have been a minority, and that minority was assimilated. I think the assimilation was something like the Hungarian language now in Europe, and Turkish, something like a Turkish language. Some of you might be surprised why I said Turkish, because Turkish is widely spoken throughout the world now. I think that Turkish is not a new language, and I also think Hungarian is not a new language. I'm quite sure that both Hungarian and Turkish, or languages like those, they have their roots at least about 8,000 years ago, where the first lexicology was formed, the first vocabulary of the stem words were formed, and they even served the Indo-Iranic languages and the Indo-European languages, even the Chinese language. Because when I do my research, I compare the languages, and I see scholars talk about loan words, and they say Chinese has Turkish loan words, or Turkish had, let's say, Indo-European loan words, blah blah blah, or vice versa, or the Indo-European language took words from Turkish. And when I compare languages, as I said, I also watch people who are comparing brother languages, right? For example, I once watched Persian and Greek, and the Greek guy said something very important which blew my mind, and it was that Old Greek was very similar to Old Persian. And I see that Old Greek is very close to, it has the Turkish words in it. It has the same words, sometimes the same words as Turkish. So I am quite sure that Greek was very much affected by Turkish, or vice versa. So the languages in the world, they were affected by each other. I don't say they were assimilated. Some of them were not assimilated as much as Turkish was, or the Turkic words were. They were affected by each other, and most probably they took some words, especially the Scythians, right? They took words from Greek. So Greek, let's say, spoke an Indo-European language. Of course, it's an Indo-European language, and because the Scythians traded with the Greek, they had to probably, maybe the Scythians knew more than one language, because they communicated. Probably they knew something close to, because they also traded with the Chinese, they traded with all around Asia, and they came to also Iran. So I think that they must have gotten assimilated. Their original language must have gotten assimilated, or they must have forgotten about their original language and turned to Indo-European, because maybe it was it was a trade language, and they had to communicate in a way. So their local people probably, or the families within, they spoke probably the Turkic language. They went further to speak the Turkic language, the old Proto-Turkic or uralic language, which survived until today and formed different families, like probably Mongolian, probably the other Hungarian families and Turkish families, Turkic families, I say. So I try to look from a different perspective, from a different point of view, and say I try to be more logical in that sense. So as I said, uh, the language that was the language that was suppressed was actually the Uralic language. That's what I claim. And Indo-European, which was of course spoken at that time, got influenced by the Uralic vocabulary very much. So they have common words taken into the Indo-European, Indo-Iranian or Indo-European, both language groups, which of course is similar. I'm not very sure about Persian, but I think Persian, if it's Indo-Iranian, some scholars claim that Indo-Iranian was more dominant. I'm not sure about that. I haven't made a research yet on that, but in general, I can say that the Uralic language was actually in danger thousands of years ago. Yes, it was spoken. Tribes spoke those languages, but imagine that, for example, the Caucasus or certain parts of Asia where Turkic tribes lived, Uralic tribes lived, etc. So they all lived in neighboring areas. Imagine the people. They were not a small. They were not a large group of people. They were smaller groups, and they had their own language affected, or let's say something like a language. But which language survives when you, let's say, for example, trade on your ships, or when you do seafare, right? The Greeks, for example, they are claimed. I think that I claim that the Greeks were the ones who made the European, together with the Persians probably, and the Arabs, right? Those tribes. They formed the roots of the Indo-European languages, which suppressed, of course, the other languages that were spoken in Asia, right? The original form, I think, was something like Uralic, because Kazakhstan, also, the European parts, the Eastern European parts of the steppe especially. Those groups, those sister groups, were all Uralic. And I think they also got affected by the Mongolic tribes, probably. I think the Mongolic tribes, they existed at those times, and they, of course, Siberians, etc., they all mixed together, but they were affected by each other, the languages, because they are all agglutinative languages. So speaking from the agglutinative language, which I think was older than it is claimed, it was not, because there are some scholars who claim, and which I think they are right, which is true, which is right. They think the Sumerian, for example, was once an agglutinative language, right? It's and the roots, for example, Jules Oppert, who lived in the 18th century, I suppose. I also researched on him, but there are not many articles. I think you have to buy the books, and on YouTube I couldn't find lots of things about Jules Oppert, so I had to make my research with PDF pages, etc. Jules Oppert, he was a Jewish Orientalist, and he studied the cuneiform and Sumerian, etc. Right? So I know from him that in his studies he found also cuneiform tablets which were dated before the tablets that he had found. Say, for example, in the Middle East, those areas where the Sumerians had their land, let's say, there lots of tablets were found, clay tablets were found, and he labeled them, studied them, etc. And he went further to the Asian parts, Turkmenistan, right? Those parts where Turkmens lived, the Proto-Turks. So he also found some tablets which had a uralic kind of language, which was thousands of years old. So you cannot underestimate the uralic languages. That's what I claim. I think they were at least the same age as the language that was, or the languages that was spoken during the during that time, and the same let's say 7,000, 8,000 years ago. So in the areas where the Middle East is, or where the Caucasus, and all the civilizations, small parts of civilizations were formed at those times. People interacted with each other, and I don't think they were that warlike. Most people think that people warred with each other, and they mostly traded with each other, and I think they spoke more than one language, or say language-like thing, because they had to communicate. So why would they kill each other in order to suppress one language? I don't think that was the case in the ancient world. I mean, of course, later, what the Romans did, etc., that was quite a different thing. So I'm not going to talk about the history, etc. What's my point? So I want to say that when you compare, for example, Hungarian and Turkish and Sumerian, there is a professor, a Hungarian professor, who compares Hungarian and Sumerian, and he found lots of I don't know that thing. I mean, I'm not an expert in explaining that stuff, but he is an expert on languages, on the Hungarian language, and maybe he might be a Sumerian, Sumerologist, like Muazzez İlmiyeçi. And he compared Hungarian and Sumerian, and he found out how similar some words are, and how Hungarian was affected by Sumerian, or vice versa. So they were actually very close. So if if two languages are close or language-like, because it was the protoform of Hungarian and Sumerian. So if those languages are close, this must mean that they were either neighbors, they were interacting with each other, or they were related. So that comes to mind. And also, it is the same with Turkish. If you compare Turkish and Sumerian, which many scholars do, and Muazzez İlmiyeçi is a great Sumerologist, and I think the young generation should study Sumerology and Turkology as well. So I think that lady did a great job when she compared Sumerian and Turkish, and when she studied, of course, Sumerology, because Turkish, if you take the Turkish roots, has close connections with Sumerians, the Sumerian language as well. So that means that also Sumerian and the old Turkish words were related. I don't claim that Turkish was related. I claim that, like in Hungarian, an uralic form close to Turkish was related to Sumerian. Right. So this is also what Jules Oppert found, and also I think his thesis and the things that he claimed was accepted by the Western scholars in the 18th century. I think in the 1850s or something, or maybe earlier. I'm not sure about the date. But later on, for some reason, British scholars, or I'm not sure if it was British scholars, but Western scholars, or the Indo-Europeanists, they all forgot about this. So this is not what I say, this is what I read, and I also claim that this was the case. Why? Why so? It must have been probably because of colonialism. It must have been because whose language is going to survive? So I think those times, the race about the race, which I mean, of course, when you run, you want to win the race, right? Not that I'm going to be misunderstood by some nationalists. So those times, I think the race about languages started. Oh, which language is going to survive? Oh, the Indo-European must survive. So we must, just shove this under the carpet, shovel this under the carpet, don't mention it, forget about it, suppress one part of the language while the other is going to be thriving. So I think those times the nationalist movements or the nationalist thoughts started because every part of or every language family wants his or her language to survive. So how can you do that in order to stay rich, let's say, or in order to get your colonies done or your trade done, etc. So you must survive by suppressing the other language. I think that happened in the probably 18th centuries because the truth came out. The truth is that the Uralic languages once served the Sumerian language, and that is probably Proto-Turkic, Proto-Hungarian, which was the same source. Or maybe there was only one source, which I'm not sure, but maybe there was only one source which had also the Chinese in the language, the Koreans in the language, the Indians, the all the Uralic words, vocabulary, languages, the proto languages, I mean, and also the Greek language. Some scholars they claim that there must have been one proto language, but they don't include the Uralic languages. I think the Uralic languages should be included. I think there was only one, say that's what I claim, there was only one route where all tribes, because they were not crowded people in the continents. I mean, not as crowded as today, and there are lots of languages today. So they could communicate with each other with sister languages, right? So a small group of Proto-Chinese, a small group of Japanese, a small group of Mongolic, a small group of steppe, probably tribes, a small group of, I'm not sure, but Slavic tribes probably as well. But I'm going 10,000, maybe 15,000, 20,000 years earlier, right? So probably also the ancient American languages, probably they had that root, right? So I will mention the American Indians later on as well, but let me stay to the topic. So those probably, that's what I claim, they had sister languages where they, something like languages where they communicated freely and easily, but all of them were involved. The Proto-Arabs, the Proto-Jewish probably, right? And the Germanic, and all the world which was once connected in spread, and I think that language evolved in Asia, right, and it spread throughout the world to all the other continents, deriving other languages, deriving other branches, right, which came of course until today. So because mankind, let's say, people were not that crowded in the past. I mean, there were tribes, smaller tribes, and they had to communicate with each other, so they had to speak at least several kinds of languages in a small form, and they must have had common words, common vocabulary in order to communicate. So this is logical. So only later Indo-European was formed, or Uralic languages were formed, or the big civilization like Chinese, for example, was formed. The Chinese language and its branches were formed. And later on, it branched into the big, for example, the Slavic languages, etc., according to the continents, because continents shape the languages as well. So what I claim is never underestimate Hungarian, never underestimate Turkish, and the Proto-Turkic, never underestimate the Sumerian connection with Turkish and Hungarian. And also, some people claim that the Bulgars, the Russians, the Proto, for example, the Romanians, etc. Okay, they speak different languages today. They speak a Slavic language. They were very much influenced by other branches of languages. Even Turkic people, they were influenced by other languages, and now there are, for example, Turkic roots in Bulgaria and in Russia as well. But that doesn't mean that those people are not related with us, right? So when, for example, some Ukrainians, I read their comments, and for example, on the Scythians, some of them claim, oh, they were Ukrainians, they were proto, blah blah blah. Some of them say they were Slavic. Some of them, I don't understand. And when I say they had a common root with the Uralic languages, for example, or the Uralic people, like, for example, the Hungarians, the Turks, and even the Russians. And I really think there were lots of Turkic tribes in the Scythians, proto-Turkic tribes among the Scythians. And I don't mean it was a small number. It was only a different period of time, which was more peaceful than ours. That's what I think. And people didn't war with each other. They traded with each other. That's what I claim. So they were more, I think, dominant than today. That language was, or those people were more dominant than today. So some people, or most of the people, they don't want to hear this. They don't want to accept this. And they think, okay, they go to nationalist feelings, and some of them say, oh, they were Russian. Some even swear. I don't want to mention the comments now. I want to free myself from that part. So I never want to mention that. But I think we should overcome this. We should think more peaceful, because I don't really think those people, those times, they raided or they roamed when they communicated with each other, or when they formed their first languages. They mostly traded, probably, even when they were on their horses, because Barry Cunliffe states that the horsemen from the steppes close to Kazakhstan, right? They traded with the Greeks, because Greeks had lots of colonies close to where the Scythians lived. So and he says the Greeks traded them with wine, with other goods. I remember the wine thing now, with goods. And in contrary, the Greeks, they traded with, they took fur, they took probably milk products, etc., because the Scythians dealt with pastoralism. They were nomadic, but they had families. They knew how to also they had animals, and they knew how to cultivate things, etc., etc., because on one hand, we can say they were nomadic, but I think they were also, on the other hand, places where they settled down as well. I mean, there were some times where Turkic tribes would also settle down in Asia. Um, but that's another topic, of course. So let me not dive into that because otherwise there will be branches and the topic will be divided. So would I say that most probably people in those times had more peaceful contacts that we think today was the case. And Johannes Krause, he is a biogenetist and a very important figure. And he says that the first migration took place from Anatolia to Europe, which was around 8,000 years ago, and most probably those people spoke a kind of Indo-European language. So if you consider the Uralists, the Uralic people, people must have spoken a kind of proto-language, which was close to Turkish, close to Hungarian. So I think that the main source of the languages, it must have been very, very much older than claimed. There must have been a common source for more than 10,000 years, because if you think of the stones in the T-shaped stones in Göbekli Tepe and stuff like that, they are more than 11,000 years old. So I don't think that in that area there was only one species of people living there. They must have communicated with each other, not only the ancestors of the Iraqis or Jews or the ancestors of the Iranians lived there. I also think that the Proto-Chinese or the Asian tribes were there as well. They must have communicated there in those areas. So you cannot claim that one land was occupied with only those people, because at those times there were I think there were smaller groups of clans who mixed with each other probably. They intermarried and they traded, right? Of course there were wars, but I think most of the time, because people were such small communities, maybe they didn't have the need to war, because they were only a minority on the planet. They were not that crowded. I think wars later developed when people got more crowded and they had to defend their lands. But first, maybe it was curiosity, learning the proto vocabularies of the ancient main language, probably, right? If you call it language. So they had to communicate, they had certain common words, right? And when you think of agriculture, and when you think of, for example, the parts of the body, etc., what comes in mind is that Hungarian and Turkish have, or once had, the similar the same words, right? That's not what I claim. It is a lady who is a Turkologist, right? She is Hungarian. I'm not sure if I wrote her name down, but she is Hungarian. I didn't write her name down. I'm so sorry. But maybe next time when I think her name was Ava or Anna or something. I'm not sure. But anyway. So I think she was very right, and she even claims that when there were the steppe people, for example, she talks about the history of Hungarians, and when the Hungarians first arrived in the steppe, they came from the Urals down to northern Europe, to the parts where close to Hungary now, the geography. She says that there were already Turkic tribes living there, Turks living there. So they were sister languages. So how would they communicate if they didn't have common words? And she claims that Hungarians took the words, the words for grain, crop, barley, etc., yogurt kind of stuff, milk kind of stuff, body parts kind of stuff, all from the Turks. So that means that some people should forget about their nationalist feelings and never underestimate Hungarians, Turks. Even people should think that, once before, say for example, now people who are claiming the Scythians were Ukrainians, etc. I even think among those people, once in history and even in Russia, there are lots of Turkic people who intermixed, who got mixed, right? So there is no one pure race in the world, and we are not talking about racism. So we are all somehow related, and there must have been one source. But you cannot claim that it was those languages. I especially don't claim that it was the Indo-European. I don't claim it was the Mideast where cultivation spread. It was probably more further to the east, the northeast of Asia, but probably not Slapgrave. So it must have been an area closer to Europe that spread first the big culture, and because there was much intermingling within the groups, and where there is intermingling within the groups, even in Anatolia, of course, those times, even in from Africa to the Levant, for example, from Africa to the Mideast, there was lots of intermingling, yes, but not as much as it was in parts of Europe and the steppe. I think that was the most most part where the spread of culture took place and the roots of that cultures were formed. So as a conclusion, I just want to say, never underestimate what you are trying to suppress now. Thank you very much.